Welcome to the Golf Improvement Podcast, episode 89.
Welcome to the podcast for golf lovers and enthusiasts who are looking to take their games to new heights. Dedicated to custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice to improve your golf game. This is the Golf Improvement Podcast with your host, Tony Wright.
Hello, this is Tony Wright from Game Improvement Golf in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, with the Golf Improvement Podcast, dedicated to bringing you useful information on custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice techniques, bringing you the custom club fitting experience of your life and lower scores always. I want to share three really neat things that happened this past week. First of all, a shout out to a very good friend, Juan Gutierrez, who's the author of a terrific putting improvement book titled Make More Putts. Juan, about a week ago, shot 69, one under his age, and I know this wasn't a fluke. He has worked very hard to achieve this goal. Way to go, Juan. What an awesome accomplishment. Second, this past weekend, a very talented local golfer, Brad Hawkins, who's about to go to the Web.com Q School event, came to me to do a Sam Putt Lab evaluation. And long story short, he had recently switched to a new putter and wanted to learn a little bit about his stroke and also about how much that putter matched or did not match his stroke. He practices his putting a lot every week. I'm very impressed by his dedication. Well, we learned that he has a terrific putting stroke and the new putter's a great fit for him. And if I did anything really well with him, I said, don't go messing with what you're doing. Well, the day after we did the SAM session, he emailed me and said he shot 59 at Three Ridges Golf Course in Knoxville, and it's a career best round for him. Well, it's been great to meet you, Brad, and I hope you do what you set out to do in that qualifier. But by far, the best thing this week that happened was getting to do this interview with a terrific person, Jamie Donaldson, Europe's senior aim point putting instructor. He shared some very valuable information about aim point and green reading in this interview, and I know you're going to have a lot of fun learning from him today.
www.gameimprovementgolf.com.
Hello, this is Tony Wright with the Golf Improvement Podcast, and it is a real treat today to get to listen to and learn from Jamie Donaldson. And Jamie is actually, he has more than 19 years of golf coaching experience, but importantly for today, he was Europe's first senior aim point instructor. He works with many very well-known tour players. And I listened to a little video on your website, and I liked the words that you said in that one of the little videos. You said, physics trumps guessing. And yes. So I think that's a lot of some of the things that we'll talk about. So, Jamie, sure. thanks for being on the show with me today.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for inviting me, Tony.
It's going to be delightful. Well, on your website, the first thing that kind of grabbed me, it said you took the plunge to become Europe's first aim point putting coach. Talk about what, which I'm assuming that was a really great decision on your part, that you're glad that you did it. So, a little bit how that came about.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd call it a life-changing decision, that one. And I'll tell you the story, and if you think I'm going on too much, just pull me up.
No, we'll be fine.
So what happened was I was a coach, coaching full swing, living in Cambridge, England. I was coaching at an amazing facility which was purpose-built. They'd spent a lot of money on a state-of-the-art coaching facility. Driving range with 24/7 video, 3D systems, TrackMan, everything you could have. And this was back in 2009, so still quite early for having all those toys to play with.
Yeah.
And my clients were asking me how to read greens. And I played. I'm still a pro. I'd played as a professional, and I thought, I can recite the golf machine inside out. I understand all the swing techniques, but I don't have any answer on green reading. So I looked into my collection of books, all my resources, DVDs at the time, and I couldn't find anything on green reading. And I thought, I God knows what I did. There's no idea what I did. So I started to research, and that's when I found I came across Aimpoint. Someone probably mentioned it to me, and I researched Aimpoint a little and realized there was this green reading system. And so I contacted Aimpoint, and there was a coach called John Graham. Yeah. Everyone knows John Graham.
Yeah.
And I flew him and his wife over, and I got 48 clients together. And for 2 days, we ran green reading classes at a golf course near me called Cambridge Meridian. And it's called Meridian because it's right on the GMT Meridian timeline. And we did 12 hours of instruction.
Wow.
And that was, in 2 days, and for 6 separate groups. And, I had this chart that Aimpoint created, had 600 numbers. The physics was obviously correct. But my clients still couldn't quite grasp it, and I don't think I could quite grasp it. And Mark Sweeney, who's the creator of it, he invented the software that creates the blue line that was used on the Golf Channel.
Yeah.
He invented Aimpoint 2003. It was first on CBS around 2005, I think, just before Golf Channel picked it up. And I was in touch with him, and he wanted to know how it went, and and Mark's he's since become a really, really good close friend. And the way Mark works is, how does it work? Can we do it quicker? Can we do it faster? Is it easier to pick up? And he was picking my brains about teaching Aimpoint, teaching the chart at the time it was called Midpoint.
Yeah, I took that class. In fact, I've taken both of them. So I mean,
and I think I was. Yeah, and I think I was a PGA tutor at the time. So one of my jobs was teaching the coaches that are trying to get their certificate how to teach for the PGA. So I was teaching them how to coach, and I used a bit of that knowledge, and Mark and I spoke a lot. And then he diverted from Bangkok to come and see me. So 2 days in the UK. I'm not sure he'd spent much time here before, and he turned up and shared with me everything. And we didn't even know what we were doing. We sat there for 2 days in a room. He shared all his data, everything about green reading. And I just said, look, I love it. And I like you. And, I've got a great coaching business, but I really think this could be something amazing. I think it's never been taught before. And I said, listen, how about we change history together? I said, let's rewrite the history books in golf and with green reading, and let's do something. And I remember, and Mark will listen to this, and he sat back at the time and said, "Oh, well, keep something in your back pocket."
He wasn't totally all in yet, huh?
Well, he was like, because he obviously saw how enthused I was. Yeah. And we went for dinner with my wife and the kids that night, and he'd been with us 48 hours, and we had a load of wine, and we sat there, and I just said, you know what? I'm all in. I'm coming with you. And he said, well, it's up to you. And we shook hands, and I wrote a 6-year plan. And the 6-year plan was all about coming out of what I was doing, helping Aimpoint, getting it onto European tour. There was a 6-year plan anyway. And within 6 months, I'd smashed the whole plan.
Wow.
So, and before I knew it, I was in Orlando. So I think I did the deal with Sweeney in around November, and January the next year I was at the Orlando show with him, and we were promoting Aimpoint, and I think while I was out there, we got the call to go and work with Brian Gay.
Sure.
Who's a real character. So my first real big US tour player that I got to work with was Brian Gay, and that was a real baptism of fire. That's a story for another day. I mean, he did great, but he's got his own way of learning.
Well, and he's got a fabulous short game overall too, at least from the outside, from what I know. Yeah,
and he was the first person I'd met from Alabama.
Ah.
So that was some interesting times. And that's the journey for me realistically. And 2010 was when I was hitting the road with Sweeney, and we've travelled pretty much every country coaching, refining Aimpoint, and as a byproduct of us getting together, the Express Read is born.
Yeah.
And the Express Read, as you know, is feet and fingers. And to sort of wrap up this story, so I'm not going on too much, the Express Read was pretty much discovered by accident. It was an instructor called Rob Noel, and Mark was working on a kid's read where you just used your thumb and you worked out which foot was lower and you put your thumb the other side of the hole, and it meant they always got the right direction of break. And the comment from Rob was, hey, wouldn't it be cool if you could stand somewhere and it meant more than one finger? And all of a sudden we were like, holy cow, this works. We were doing it. It was working. It was crazy. And then fast forward to 2014, we had Stephen Bowditch and Adam Scott winning using it.
Yeah, boy.
So the Express Read was like just dropping a bomb.
Well, and it's like you said early on when you started talking. I mean, you even admitted yourself that it was hard for people to grasp the other one. Not that it wasn't right.
No,
but how do you absorb it? Yeah.
Well, the chart. The thing about the chart is it has to be practiced regularly. There's a lot of numbers, and you've got to work out the distance from the hole, the angle you're crossing the slope, and the percentage of slope. And then you'd need to look at the chart, and it would give you a number. And the charts worked in 5, 10, 15, and 20 feet increments. So there was always some math to do there. So you had to practice it a lot. And it was fairly, you could get, there was multiple ways you could make a mistake, put it that way.
Yeah, yeah.
And it definitely made some players slower. So some players would take longer. So that there was a label attached to Aimpoint that it would slow the game up. And I've already told you that Sweeney's motto is, make something work, then make it work faster.
Yeah. And that's exactly what it is, right? Yeah.
And then the Express Read is, we're reading 6-foot putts in 3 seconds, 20-foot putts in up to 10 seconds, and anything else can be 15, 20 seconds. It's without a doubt and that's why we called it Express. We didn't have a name for it, and they were asking what we called it, and we called it Express because it's so fast.
And that's a perfect name, right? I mean, that you talk about marketing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it absolutely fit. Well,
yeah.
the listeners to my podcast, I mean, a lot of them have heard things about Aimpoint, and I've written some things and references, but talk about a few other things, other perspectives on Aimpoint and Express that, in terms of benefits that people don't typically think about or realize.
Yeah, well, there's obviously the speed of the read element, so it's going to speed up people's play. But and this it's a good question, that because there's probably several paths you can go down with this. But one of the ones I talk about a lot are players staying in the present, where they're solving a puzzle. They're standing there, they're working out which foot is lower. They go to certain points in the putt, measure the slope. They come back, they put their hand into position, and it says that's where you've got to aim. So they're staying present with their problem solving, whereas if you were reading it with your eyes, you might be walking around the hole looking, thinking, it could do this, it might do that. Last time I had a putt like this, it did this. So the psychologist would say that they're living in the future or the past when they're trying to solve a problem, as opposed to staying in the now, which is the action of playing the putt and everything else that goes with it. So that's a big one, and also it preoccupies the mind as opposed to just sort of wildly trying to come up with something, come up with a decision of where to aim. We've all been there, right?
Oh yeah.
You're walking around the putt thinking, make a decision, what's it going to be? And so that on one strain, I see a lot of players getting the benefit from that. Also, with Aimpoint, you get a fairly consistent read. So you will, once you've made your slope choice, it will mean X amount of inches to aim from the hole. And if players are constantly under-reading putts, and you know, every class, everybody is amazed at how much you actually have to allow for break. And I would say the average misread is by 50%.
Yeah.
And I'll tell people in the beginning of the class that is the case. Visually, they will read it as 50% less than it is. And when we get to do large reads, they say, you know what, I'd have picked half of that. But if they do pick half of it, they've only got a couple of options to make a putt. So if you take somebody that misreads putts, and everyone makes putts at some stage, the only way they actually make those putts is by changing speed, so hitting a putt harder, changing face aim, so allowing the face to now aim higher than their chosen target, or even manipulation in the stroke. So lots and lots of, you have to do some things wrong to make a putt if you misread putts.
And you've got to do it wrong almost consistently too.
Yeah.
So you got to keep changing how wrong you are.
Totally. And exactly. And that makes players streaky, because there'll be times when they're not on steep greens and they're used to hitting the putts firmer. So, you know, it messes with their own perceptual reads. But it's two wrongs make a right sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, and if you're relying on that, then hey, if your stroke's great, you're in big trouble.
Because
you know, you're
ruining it. Yeah, you're messing your stroke up. Yeah.
You know, you need a training aid that makes you worse if you can't read a green.
That's a fabulous way of putting it.
Yeah, you know, you're better off opening the face at impact or closing it. And if you did it consistently, then you'd get a 50-50 success rate.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah. I think those are some great, almost all of those things are things I guess I hadn't thought about before. So, particularly the one about sort of being in the now. I really like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And the psychologists or the psychs that have done the class, I think on my list is I need to understand it more so I can explain it better. But, if you're worried about an outcome, you can end up leaning towards that and making it happen. Whereas if you're actually just problem solving followed by that's where I've got to aim, then you're back to throwing and catching sort of skill.
Yeah.
Just pulling the trigger. You know, you hear that phrase a lot. Just get set up, trust your line, pull the trigger. We've all holed putts when we made a funny stroke, right?
Yeah.
And it's what made you do that, and it's the intuitive change, and it's not something you intended, but you did it. And I think that's what we're cutting out with a lot of guys in respect to that.
Yeah, great stuff. Well, this is something I'm not sure I've ever talked with anybody about before, but related to aim point. But you know that after the 2 or 3 hours, do you have specific tasks and things that you tell people to do afterwards? Because, how do they learn to trust it? 2 hours isn't enough and things like that. What kind of specific things do you get people to focus on afterwards?
Well, I always start my class by telling people that we don't finish until everyone's confident they could take it onto the golf course. So with the express read, it's a 2-hour class, and it really does have a start, a middle, and an end. And we pride ourselves in being able to say to everybody at 2 hours, could you now go out on the golf course and use it? And everybody says yes. An aim point class is 90% doing and 10% listening to me. So we have a very, very specifically structured class, but things that they have to practice, or things that you need to be good at is, well, there's only 2 skills. First one is which foot is lower than the other.
Yeah, right.
And the other is what was your rating be? And they're going to spend 95% of their time between a 1% and 4% slope, but 5, 6, 7s, 8s do exist. And to give you an idea on that, and I know you know this, but when you get to an 8% slope, the ball will roll away. So if you spend most of your time on slopes half of that, it's just a case of choosing the right number. And practicing slope feel is definitely a key. And there's 2 ways of doing it. You could use a digital level and you can test yourself. But what we like to say is, have a look at your misses. If you're missing putts low, you need to increase your number, or you need to add a little bit of arm bend, which would how we cater for green speeds. One of the things we like people a task would be to hit putts and look at your results. If it's regularly missing on the high side, your numbers could be a little high, or your arm might be a little bit too bent. So we really teach people to analyze their missed putts. Watch what goes on. Is it the right speed? If it was the right speed, what did the curve look like? Did it look like a 1, 2, or a 3? What is the number you chose? And teaching people to watch a ball and say, that was a 3, but I chose 2. It really helps them with their tendencies as well.
Yeah.
So, it's so that to lock in is slope feel, the routines and the actual the 4 ways of reading putts that we teach people are so easy to remember, but we send them notes every class, so that takes care of that. But it's just literally trust and knowing how to deal with different situations. So reading the notes, understanding when to measure where, and how to go on the first green, miss a putt low, go to the next hole and change your slope feel or change your arm position.
Yeah, and adjust through the course of the round. And then, if you're playing on a lot of different courses, then that, it takes some learning to adjust for that too, I'm assuming.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's different speeds. I think we're going to talk about grain a bit later, but we can talk about grain and wind. But realistically, and this is something I say to people, is, you're probably going to be choosing numbers between 1 and 4. And you've got 14 clubs in your bag, and you've got to choose which one to hit. So we're giving you a quarter of the options that you have when you choose what shot to hit.
Now, isn't another thing too? Maybe you say this to them, that realize that even if you're not perfect, and of course you want everybody to be, you're reading greens way better than you ever did before.
Oh,
and start trusting that part.
Yeah, I mean, everyone leaves the clinic as good as a tour player at reading greens, and that just doesn't happen in golf instruction. That I've coached someone that's never ever played golf before, and this was in Sweden, and it was the brother-in-law of the pro there, and we had to give him a Peltz roller because he couldn't putt, and he came to the class as a never played golf before, and he was reading putts for the other players in the end, and we had a couple of tour players in there. And we did laugh. We laughed hard about it because a total newbie was reading putts for a player, and if the player didn't hit the putt, the guy was using a Peltz roller, and he was doing fantastic.
Well, that just shows you how it really works, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It's you're reading greens better. You have to trust it, but the key is if you miss a putt, why? And we can reverse engineer all missed putts, and that makes people stronger, because before aim point, you could miss 18 putts in a row, 18 first putts. You don't know what you did. Yeah. You just know they're not going in. But if it's aim point and you move the numbers and you move the arm, and you might start to see some success, or it might be a start line issue, people understand their tendencies pretty quick once their reads are good.
Yeah. Great description. Well, I said at the start, you get a chance to work with a lot of tour players, and you mentioned Brian Gay, and you don't have to talk about him, but what ends up being sort of the differentiator when you work with those folks in terms of how are they a little bit different?
Well,
I'm sure there are huge numbers of things you could talk about, but
yeah, that's a potentially endless subject, because also on European tour, I work with one of every nationality, and they're all different. But so I think the biggest thing, the biggest thing would be they're already at an elite level. They're already successful world-class golfers. So for them to accept that they do something that bad is hard. So sometimes we just start at 5 foot and in, and we just let them sort of get comfortable with the short putts, which are 50% of all your putts, by the way.
Right.
And we gain their trust with the fact that they can make very fast, quick reads inside 5 or 6 feet. So you'll see a lot of players straddling the ball that don't use their fingers, and they're either they've learnt it and they're happy with just that, or they're on an early course of learning aim point, because we would drip feed it to tour players, because they have to somewhere acknowledge the fact that what they were doing was so bad. you'll get a tour player who tells you they can't read greens, or you'll get a tour player that says, I had one, he's won the US Open, so he's a major winner, who would tell me that he believes he's the best green reader. And I worked with him over a few months. And the first session was actually at a tour event, and he would say, pick this read, pick this read, pick this read, and we did it. And he had an amazing action, probably one of the best putters I've ever worked with. And he wouldn't believe any of the reads, and he'd hit them, and he'd say, wow, that really did do what you told me. And it took him a while to use in the tournament. He wouldn't use it. And his problem was, I won a major with my eyes. How can I be so bad at something? So with the players, it's just a case of slow and steady, drip feeding information. Let them tell you that they need aim point, as opposed to you telling them.
That's really interesting. Yeah, and do they often come back to you too and explicitly say, "You're right. I really wasn't that good at this." And when they do that, then that's probably the standpoint. That is probably the point when they really will allow themselves to use it, right?
That's right. And there's a great story recently, and I can use it because he said it in the press. Was Justin Rose was asked about his preparation for the Masters this year, and he said, "I'm going to start using aim point again." And he obviously felt like the greens at Augusta were that tricky for him, or he misread them the year before, whatever. I mean, he's been using aim point for about 3 years.
Yeah.
And the thing was, he went back to aim point at Augusta, and he came second. And he's used it again ever since. So what makes a player not use it and then realize they're making mistakes and then start using it again?
Yeah.
That's a question back to you. That's that's and if we knew the answer, Tony, Mark and I would it'd be in a blog of ours,
Well, you'd send me a referral thing or something. You'd send me a check if I could tell you what that was.
so the accomplished players, I've coached people that have come to me to disprove it. I've coached so many young players whose fathers or coaches will say they hit it better than anyone, just can't get the ball in the hole. And that's because they haven't figured it out yet. They just haven't played enough golf in different courses to get a good enough guess. So the people who are breaking into the top 25, when Adam was world's number one, when they're playing regularly with players winning using aim point, we'll get players ask us then, or you'll get people that are sliding down the money list and they've had to admit that their putting's letting them down.
Yeah. I had fun at my son lives near Atlanta, and we went to the Tour Championship 2 or 3 years ago, and it was really fun. It's just a small story, but we saw Adam Scott on, I think it was the second green, and he just went bang, 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 like you would have seen it in the class. And it was like a 4-degree slope, and right. You didn't make I don't think he made the putt. Sorry, Adam, but I mean, it was right on. It was like 20, 30 footer. So
yeah,
it was fun to watch that.
I've worked with Adam, and one of the things we do would be just to keep reading 20, 30 foot putts, just keep reading them. And if you give him a training aid, maybe something that's just align his putter face, then he'll make 18, 20 footers. And the make percentage in play is around 14% for tour players. So he really has his actions locked in, and it's just, if he gets the speed right, he makes lots of putts, a lot of putts. He's a machine.
Yeah. Well,
he's undoubted.
Yeah. Let's go to the other extreme then, the 15, 20 handicapper. And do you get lots of folks? Have you been able to attract lots of folks in that arena?
Yeah.
And then what do you do? What do you end up doing a little bit differently maybe with them?
Well, the great question. So we've coached around 60,000 students now.
Jeez.
And I think worldwide, and I think that I think I'm going to pick a number out of the air, but more than 50% would be around 15 handicap and above. Maybe 60% would be in that area. So it's definitely not a reed which is designed just for tour players. It was actually designed for kids in the beginning. But what happens is their speed is so bad because of their misreads. And what happens quickly with bad golfers is they start to control their speed well. If they've always got a certain read and they're not having to change their speed too much, their aim gets better, their speed gets better, all the manipulations break down, and they start to see performance that way. You know, I get quite excited teaching a high handicapper, and we used Stuart Leong has created a stat software called Shots to Hole.
Yes,
and he gets a million pieces of data inputted every 2 months, and he's been running for, let's say, since 2005. No, that's wrong. 2000. Let's say he's been going for 5 years. So he has a million pieces of shots put in every 2 months. And what we've been able to pull from his data, for example, is a 20 handicapper will 3-putt 25% of their 20-foot putts.
Wow.
So if we can get bad golfers, they'll hate me for saying it, if we can get 17, 20 handicapper golfers just stopping their 3 putts, then it's worth 7 or 8 shots around. If we can make 15 handicapped golfers more confident inside 5 feet, where they have half of their putts, they're going to hold more putts. So it means more to those golfers, I would say. You know, with a tour player, you're talking a shot around, maybe 4 shots a tournament is extreme wealth in some cases. Yeah. But club level golfers, it's stopping the frustration, stopping the nerves, and actually, what I see in golfers and the amount of emails I get is that people start to believe in themselves. They actually, and you know what? I've just remembered. This is a great quote for you. People actually start enjoying putting again. People, yeah.
Oh my gosh! It sounds like "Make America Great Again." Don't
yeah,
enjoying putting again. Yeah, right.
I'll tell you what. I'm gonna save that. Make putting great again. I might just.
I like tweet. That. Put it on your website. Yeah.
I might get a hat with "Make Putting." Yeah, that's great. And when Sweeney hears this, he'll laugh so hard when he hears that. Yeah, they actually tell me they enjoy putting again.
Well, hold on. I got to write that down because that's going to be the title of the post.
yeah, do that. I'm going to text him right now.
Oh God, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh jeez. Well, you mentioned earlier too that you knew I was going to talk a little bit about grain, and grain really is. There's still huge numbers of people that don't interpret the influence of grain correctly, aren't there? I think, and yeah, it's not that hard.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll give you because we've also been taken out of context on this in the past. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the official aim point notice on grain.
Fabulous. Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, most of the time, grain grows downhill. So the grass will grow in the direction that slope goes. So grain doesn't follow the sun. Okay, it doesn't follow the setting sun. It grows downhill most of the time. However, when you get onto an aim point was invented on Bermuda grass, grainy greens. So I'll tell you what we do first of all. Supposing you've got a coarse grass that follows the slope, what it can do is it can actually change the stimp value. So downhill putts will break more because the ball is going with the grass. So if you think that the grain is affecting break, you would adjust your arm bend to suit. If you're putting uphill into the grain, the ball will break less, so you have to make adjustments for that. And if you're putting across grain, the ball goes up for 75% of the time and comes down 25% of the time, and it pretty much cancels itself out. But if you get an extremely flat surface and the grass doesn't know which way down is, like a 0.5%, there has been many occasions where grain has grown against the direction of slope. So if you've got a 0.5% left to right and the grain grows right to left, it might negate that putt. It might turn it into a straight aim. Do you follow me?
That's going to be one I'm going to have to listen back a little bit to.
Yeah. And absolutely. And if you think the grain's affecting flat putts, then you have to look for the grain and you have to factor it in. If it's going against the fairly flat slope, then it will reduce break, and if it's going with it, it might increase break.
And those two are probably the most important ones for the vast majority of putts for the average golfer, I guess, right?
Yes, sir. And I would say if you're putting downhill and it's grainy greens, you're going to have to find a little more break. Into, you have to reduce break. And and go to your putting green, find a really flat area. Try and find grain growing against the slope. I mean, that's the challenge for anyone listening to this. Go to your putting green and roll a ball and follow the direction it breaks, and then brush the grass against that. And most of the time, the grass will then sit up, which means your grass on your greens follows slope. But go to the very flat areas, the flattest area you can find. Normally in a saddle shape, which is like a U shape. Yeah. And you might find that as the water leaves the green, it meanders. You see. It can't turn at right angles. So what happens is the grass has followed a different direction than straight downhill. So that's where we've seen most effect, on the flatter putts.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. And that would be a great one of these days. Mark needs to write that post too, doesn't he? If he hasn't already. Yeah,
I mean, it's always worth looking on aimpointgolf.com, because we've put a lot of blogs on there.
Gosh, there's some great ones, yeah.
Yeah, and we've got a load in. I tweet them quite a lot. Can I give you my Twitter handle now?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, my Twitter's @GolfDonaldson, and I like to put out the blogs regularly. We're trying to put research out there to help people. So you're right. It doesn't spring to mind, and I'm going to put that on the list.
Good. That's great. Well, Jamie, maybe just a few more things. Maybe talk about some of your most satisfying coaching experiences related to Aimpoint.
Oh,
and there's got to be a huge number of them, but I'm sure one or two of them just kind of really stick out.
Should I, on a completely selfish level, the most satisfying thing I get is the fact that I coach up people, and they leave experts, and they get it, and they can do it, and they're happy, and they're so happy because.
So, Jamie, we had a little glitch there for a second, but we're going to fix it. But you were talking about that you really delight in people being experts when they walk out of class. So let's come back to that.
Yeah. So, I coached for many years, and a frustration for me was 5% of my client base would actually do what I asked them. You'd coach swing, and you'd tell someone what they're doing wrong. You'd show them how to do it right. You'd put them in the right position. You'd give them the drills, and they'd say it doesn't feel right, and they'd go and play golf, and they wouldn't do it. And it was always frustrating for me to start a class or start a lesson with someone and say, right, what's happened? And they say, well, I'm still slicing it. And I'd say, how much practice have you done? They say, well, nothing. I've got a family, and I play golf for recreation. And it was very difficult to get people to do what I want, to actually move as quick as I expected them to. So I would say one of the, thinking back, if we think about the first question about when I met Sweeney, I was disenchanted with the golf industry because I wasn't getting the results out of people that I wanted because of their lifestyle, because of their input, they weren't doing as much as I wanted them to. So to have something where I can teach where they leave completely competent is a very selfish
I think
outcome.
It's a great thing. I think it's not, I don't see that as selfish either. Although I understand, but it's satisfying for sure.
Incredibly satisfying. And, I've met so many good friends that I've coached around the world. And I don't think I could ever go back to teaching anything where the client doesn't turn around to me and say, my God, that's amazing. I love it. I can do it. And then a week later, they tell me how much their handicap's reduced. And, it's a bit of a drug, really. So if I had to go back to the trenches and coaching swing, I think I don't think it would happen.
I think that's way enough talking about satisfying things because, again, 60,000 people, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is. And there's 300 instructors worldwide, and Mark and I have personally trained all of them. And the satisfaction is just every class I start, I never think, oh, I've got to do this again. I just wait. I just wait for them to the light bulbs to flash on in the class. I wait to watch the fun they have. I've been there when players have won majors that use Aimpoint. I've seen golfers who have been struggling to make enough money to keep their card start to finish mid-table and to get some abundance financially. I taught my mother and her 83-year-old partner the other day, and they went out and used it and they loved it. So
that's great.
Yeah, it's ongoing, and I'm going to touch wood right now because I'm touching wood because it's every day is satisfaction.
You've been very blessed by what you get to do.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Well, Jamie, any final words for golfers? Anything maybe that you didn't say that you wanted to say, or other specifics? Over to you at the end here.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, if you don't quantify your green read, if you're not working on choosing targets, then you're never going to build a stroke which is repeatable, and you're never going to master the speed control. So I would, the first question is the read good? Because if you just drop a ball and aim at a hole and hit it, you never quite know what was the right factor, whether it was a pull or a push, the speed was good or the read was good, because it could be a combination of errors. So my parting shot realistically would be, the reason Aimpoint is good all round is because it helps you to actually quantify your reads. And you know what? If you learn Aimpoint and your reads were close, then happy days. There's nothing wrong with people can choose good targets with their eyes, but I've not met many out of that 60,000. Trust me.
Yeah.
And I think that people learn to manipulate and they make some putts. And when you don't have to manipulate, a good stroke will serve you better. So people practice good strokes. They want a good stroke. They want to have a correct path. And they want to manage the face. And then they go out and they struggle because their green reads aren't correct. And you know what? Do you know what I'd say to everyone? Is learn to overread. Choose too much break and then net it down to what works, because there's only one sin in green reading, and that's underreading.
Yeah.
If you underread, you've had it. You've got to aim badly. You've got to change. Blah blah blah. You've got to do everything wrong. So what I would say to everyone is, overread as much as possible, and then net it down for success. If you don't want to learn Aimpoint, that's going to help you. But Aimpoint, I've seen it change many careers. And there are people listening to this that think Aimpoint's slow. It definitely isn't slow. There's people think it doesn't work. I'm afraid it works amazingly well. It's just science. Physics trumps guessing. It's basic science, and there's a computer that calculates break in 2.5 seconds across any surface, and it's got a 99% success rate. The computer taught Mark how to create an aim chart which predicts break. We turned it into feet and fingers. It's one of the most amazing things that's ever happened to golf. We've rewritten history with it.
Yeah.
And if anyone's taken a class and thinks it doesn't work, I'd personally love to chat and to help them.
This has been a great interview, Jamie. I'm glad. I really appreciate you taking the time to do it. And as we talked offline, you got a lot going on. So that you could do that. That's great. I'm going to put some links, to your website, to your Twitter handle, and to the Aimpoint instructors list in the show notes. And,
yes, please.
And it's been a real delight to learn from you today.
And anyone that listens to this, thanks for taking the time to listen. And I know Tony, I've listened to your other stuff. He does a great job. So keep doing what you're doing, because it works.
www.gameimprovementgolf.com.
Well, Jamie, thanks for that great interview, for all the information you shared, and also simply for being able to take the time to do this interview with me, because I know you've got a lot on your plate. I shared his website information, his Twitter handle, the Aimpoint website link, and also the direct link to the Aimpoint blog post in the show notes. Finally, I hope you loyal followers of my blogs, podcasts, and newsletters will consider a donation this month to support all of the work I do to create these. I put a link at the end of the podcast post where you can do this. 50% of the support funds I receive will go to the Hurricane Harvey relief funds. Well, that's it for today. In 2 weeks, I know you'll enjoy and learn from a good friend, Jim McCleary from McGolf Custom Clubs, a Golf Digest Top 100 custom club fitter, and Jim and I will talk custom club fitting and its benefits for golfers. See you in 2 weeks.
Game Improvement Golf, your source of information and inspiration to become an exceptional golfer now. www.gameimprovementgolf.com